I once taught a new rider class, and one of the students was not being honest with his wife about what he was doing that weekend. She didn't want him riding motorcycles, and he wasn't going to tell her yet. I'll tell you that story in a minute, and we'll use this guy's story to talk about dealing with family members who don't want you to ride a motorcycle. Or if you're the spouse and you don't want your significant other to ride, we'll talk about that too. Hey, my name's Kevin, and I release a weekly video here on MCrider focused on road skills or road strategy to help you become a better rider. Become a member of MCrider and get access to even more tools to help you stay sharp and develop your skills on two wheels. So what do you do when you have a family member who's dead set against you learning to ride a motorcycle? Well, surprisingly, that's a pretty frequent question that I get here on MCrider. I have received emails, direct messages, and encrypted undercover clandestine messages delivered in the stillness of the night in order to hide their agenda and seek the advice from the all-knowing MCrider to overcome this dilemma. And I get them from husbands and wives who are looking to overcome the fear that their spouse has about them learning to ride a motorcycle or buying a motorcycle. Sometimes it's from teenagers who are looking for advice from me to convince their parents. And sometimes it's the spouse who is writing to me secretly because their significant other wants to ride. Well, the same basic question gets asked from multiple angles from all kinds of would-be riders or concerned family members. Well, I'm just a motorcycle instructor, and I have no desire to step into the shoes of Dr. Phil. But in this episode of MCrider Straight Talk, we'll take an honest look at the situation and we'll see what we can come up with. So let's get back to that student in class who didn't want his wife to know he was getting his motorcycle license. I didn't really notice anything odd until we got out to the range on Saturday afternoon. Frequently during the breaks, this guy would walk off to the side and make a phone call, but he always walked far away from the group. And you could tell that he was trying to cover up the phone and muffle any outside noises when he made the call. I could also tell that the other students were starting to get suspicious about what was going on as well. Finally, he returned to the group and someone asked him who he was calling all the time. And with a sly smile on his face, he fessed up and said that he was calling his wife and she would kill him if she knew what he was out there doing. In fact, she didn't want him riding motorcycles at all. I asked him which one was more dangerous, him learning to ride motorcycles or his wife finding out, and he quickly said that his wife finding out was more dangerous. He said she had no idea that he was there, but she was starting to get suspicious or sounded suspicious on the phone. One of the other students asked him what he was telling her, and he said that he told her he was out with his buddies, but she was starting to wonder where he was at. So we were all kind of laughing with and maybe a little bit at the guy and his predicament. And I said, well, don't worry, maybe she'll just think you're out having a date with your girlfriend. And he got a big laugh out of that and said that the girlfriend story might be easier for him to explain when he got home. Well, the funny thing is he had told us earlier in the class that he already had a motorcycle, so I asked him about that. And he said, oh, yeah, I've got a motorcycle. I've parked it up at a friend's house, and he's keeping it in his garage for me. It kind of sounded like the kid hiding his mini bike from his parents that he didn't want him to know about. Well, this guy ended up doing real well in the rider class, and he passed the MSF course with no problems, but I'm not sure how well he did whenever he got home, but he did well when he was with me at least. So needless to say, I wouldn't recommend this path to the rider who's looking to get his license. All you're really doing by doing this approach is you're kicking that can further down the road because you'll still have to have that talk sooner or later, and now the issue of lying will be mixed into it as well. So aside from buying a motorcycle, hiding it in your friend's garage, and then sneaking off to take the MSF class, what's a rider supposed to do when their spouse has a lot of concerns about them riding a motorcycle? Well, to be totally honest, if both of you are just dead set in your opinion, it's all a moot point. that will need to be resolved first before this video will be of any help to you. But if there is some open and honest discussion of the subject and both parties are willing to consider the other's desires and fears, there are some things that you can do. And the first piece of advice that I've got for any couple who is having this discussion and is willing to examine the subject and hear the other person's point of view is to take the MSF class together. So even if one of you has zero desire to learn to ride a motorcycle or getting your license, taking the MSF class together can lead to a discussion based in reality and not some unknown fear. Spouses are often fearful because riding a motorcycle is an unknown. How many times has someone found out that you ride a motorcycle and the very first words that come out of their mouth is, "Oh, I hate those things," or "Motorcycles are a great way to die"? I've heard comments just like this on several occasions, sometimes from people who mean well, but that type of comment doesn't help the situation at all. It's like that old saying that bad news can travel halfway around the world before the truth can travel halfway down the street. That's never been truer when it comes to the subject of motorcycles and their danger. As soon as the subject of motorcycles comes up in any casual setting, if someone knows anyone who has had a crash, no matter how distant that person is from them, the subject of that crash comes up. What they don't hear about is all the successful riders who ride safely. They live life to the fullest and they enjoy a great pastime while mitigating much of the risk of riding a motorcycle. Nobody talks about the responsible riders, but if someone has a crash, that's all the non-riders will talk about when discussing motorcycles. So encourage your spouse to take the MSF class with you. Then at least they can see the true risks involved in riding a motorcycle, and at least your conversation has a solid starting point rather than arguing about the unknown. Riding a motorcycle is like a lot of things in life. A lot of how dangerous it is depends on you. If you're a conscientious rider, you can greatly reduce your risks. But there are a whole host of things that a rider can do to make riding a motorcycle a very risky proposition. Both you and your spouse need to take an honest risk assessment to see if you're a high-risk personality. I have a video on this subject on MCrider. You can go to mcrider.com/risk, where I talk about the subject of taking a risk assessment, and you and your spouse can sit down and take an honest look at your level of risk. So high-risk riders typically don't wear gear. They go to biker bars and have a few drinks before riding home. They're risky and aggressive car drivers usually as well. They're prone to road rage, and I promise you if you're prone to road rage, that riding a motorcycle will not help you overcome it. They frequently have other high-risk activities as well, or other pastimes that are high risk. So a lower risk rider sees the importance of protective gear. They'll agree to never ride impaired. They ride within the legal speed limits and within their own ability. They take rider development seriously. They keep a level head. They understand the risk and are willing to take the steps to reduce their risk on a motorcycle, which means continued learning. So what kind of potential rider are you? Sometimes it's hard to do a risk assessment on ourselves, but if we sit down with someone who knows us, they can help us be honest with ourselves when it comes to taking a self-risk assessment. If you're one of these people who have a loved one that wants to ride, just know that riders who are in that low-risk rider category are much less at risk than riders in the high-risk category. While riding a motorcycle will never be as safe as driving a car, it's certainly not a death sentence, and for many, the rewards of riding a motorcycle far outweigh any risk of riding, especially when the risks are reduced to manageable levels. In the end, this is a decision that you and your partner will ultimately have to make together. It is a short-term solution to sneak around behind their back and get your license like the guy did years ago in my class, and I know he still had to have an even more difficult discussion after the fact. So have that hard discussion now and try to see the other person's point of view. Both parties need to be willing to give a little and to come to an honest solution that both parties can agree to. I found a great article on this subject. It's found on a website called Motorcycle Habit. It was written by Amanda Cannon on the subject of husbands and wives negotiating motorcycle ownership. If you'd like to read that article, which I think is a very interesting article if you're in this dilemma, go to mcrider.com/mchabit, and I'll forward you directly to that article. I think it's really well written, and if you're in this predicament, it's well worth the read. Until next week, guys, good luck, and I'll see you on the road.